Welcome back to another episode of Mailbag Monday, where Chris and I are answering all of your questions about marketing, AI, data, cooking, I don't know, hobbies. We don't know. This week, though, Stacia asks, if you are starting a brand from scratch, where should I start? I mean, that's a big question. So, Chris, what advice do we have for Stacia?
What's a brand?
That's not
No,
advice. That's
not rhetorical. I'm asking, what's a brand?
I think it means different things to different people. If I had to go out on a limb and guess that the context of this question, it's, I want to establish a brand that people know the name of and have a good reputation of my brand, so that when someone says, I need help with my analytics, Trust Insights is the brand that comes to mind. Or I need a really reliable vacuum, so people think of things like Dyson or Black & Decker. Or I want really good coffee, so people don't necessarily think of Dunkin' Donuts, but maybe they think of, smaller, coffee roasters. And so I think it's that brand recognition. I think she's wondering about brand awareness. And so what are the things that someone would need to do to establish that?
The best definition of a brand I've ever heard was from 2006 from a comedian and internet sensation at the time, Zay Frank, who said that a brand is a collection of emotional experiences that leads to an emotional aftertaste, not necessarily dependent on those experiences, right? So a brand is an emotional aftertaste. So he went on to say that's why you can sell, for example, grandma's cookies that has a brand associated with it, right? And you have this sort of emotional aftertaste. Well, you really can't sell old people's cookies, right? Even though they're truthfully the same thing, they have very different emotional aftertaste. So the number one thing that you have to ask then, what is the emotional aftertaste of your brand? Like, what emotions does it evoke? You pointed out very, very importantly that it's about memory. Right? Mm-hmm. Brand is about memory. What things consolidate memory? From a neuroscience perspective, there are things like repetition. Okay, I've heard this brand, seen this enough that I actually remember it. There are things like emotion. What does it evoke? There are things like the experience itself. There's even neurochemical aspects of it. Like, for example, adrenaline cements memory much faster than anything else. If you want to remember something like really well, give yourself a really cold shower for like 3 minutes and then spend the next 90 minutes studying. And because of that adrenaline rush from being freaking cold, you will actually remember things much, much better. That's basic neuroscience. So,
well, see, now here, I thought you were going to say, for that adrenaline rush, to throw a spider at someone's face and then say, remember this.
I mean, you can. The effects of adrenaline last for about 90 minutes inside the body for the impact on memory. At least this is according to Dr. Andrew Huberman at Stanford. So when we're talking about creating a brand, what is the emotion that you want to evoke? So, Katie, with Trust Insights, what is the emotion that we want people to associate with us?
A feeling of safeness, a feeling of trustworthiness, a feeling of consistency and reliability. Basically, I want our customers to feel like they are completely protected when they're working with us in terms of their data. And so with that, that's where, we wanted to start making sure that we had very clear, a mission and vision and values. And so if I was starting a brand, that's where I would start, is what do I want to be known for? And it's not just, I want to be known for the best product in the whole wide world, but to your point, Chris, you want to have that emotional remembrance of the brand. So I want us to be known for consistency. I want us to be known for honesty, authenticity. And that's where you start to build your brand. And so as you're standing up your various social media accounts, your blog, your newsletter, make sure that you're using those emotional pieces as your guiding force to say, is this blog post authentic to my brand? Is this, if I read this and I wasn't, in charge of the brand, would I go, hey, that sounds like a bunch of BS? Or, you know what? I want to work with that person.
Exactly. One of the things that you'll find out there on the web are things like, this is Robert Plutarch's Wheel of Emotions, which looks at taking apart complex emotions and sort of distilling them down to what are the primary and secondary emotions that are involved. The sort of the yellow and green ones are where kind of we live, right? Between joy and trust, sort of acceptance, serenity. Those are the kinds of things that we're trying to create. Is that sense of optimism, that sense of love, perhaps some degree of interest. The things that our brand is not about are things like anger, annoyance, contempt, disgust. There are brands that capitalize on that. There are absolutely are brands. There are politicians and political movements of all over the world that capitalize on those emotions. So part of starting at brand is to say, well, what do we want people to feel? Like, what aligns with how we're doing things? There may be things like combinations between grief and admiration, right? If you are in the funeral business, those are emotions that you would want to delicately manage.
And I think that if your answer is, I want people to feel disgust and anger and aggression, if that aligns with your brand and the problems that you solve, that's a totally acceptable answer. For us, it's the opposite. If people are feeling those about our brand, then we're not doing our jobs correctly. However, one of the ways we can look at it is we can find people who are feeling that about their own data and introduce these other emotions of joy and trust and love and, serenity. Like, we want to take the negative emotions and turn them into positive. So I think that that's a really good way to start. If you're starting your brand today, where do you start? Think about the emotions that you want to bring out in people as they're talking about your brand, working with you. Think about your competitors. What kinds of emotions do they bring out in people? So think about, a really great example is a cable company. Chris, when you think about a cable company or an internet service provider, what kind of emotion do you immediately feel?
I mean, gosh, I go prevaricate between annoyance and contempt and disgust and loathing.
Yeah.
Pensiveness,
frustration, stress,
exactly.
grief.
Probably not the kinds of things that those companies think that they're engendering.
And so if you are, let's say you want to disrupt that industry, what kind of offering can you have that is going to evoke serenity and trust? And so that's the way that you would start to approach it. Not product first, but people first. Put the emotion first. What do you want people to feel when you are helping them?
The easiest framework to put this in, it would be like essentially an emotional SWOT analysis, right? What are the strengths and weaknesses of our brand? What are the positive emotions we conjure? What are the negative emotions we conjure? Then we look at our competitors. What positive emotions do they conjure? What negative emotions do they conjure? And where are the gaps? Where are the opportunities? If our competitors are engaging in, trying to create fear or apprehension, that means that their customers, their prospects, were going to be in that state if they're trying to leverage and evoke that. So if we come out at that with a message of like serenity and trust, that's an opportunity to pursue against them.
It strikes me, and this, I don't want to get too off topic, but if you're looking to poll your audience and you don't want to directly say, like, how do I make you feel? You could do some sort of a survey around, when you think of the following products or services, what color are they? And so, like, when I think of, customer service for Comcast, I think red because it makes me angry, and not necessarily the brand, but just sort of the emotion. And so that may be another way to approach it. If you're starting to do your research, you could give, some sort of a market survey that associates colors and words together so that you can get a sense of the emotional impact.
Exactly. And if you want to do some, market sentiment analysis, large language models, tools like ChatGPT, you can give them, say, reviews of your competitors and say, Give me an emotional analysis using Plutarch's Wheel of Emotions. What percentage of each emotion is in these reviews? Particularly if you were to go say like maybe Amazon or Google Business, say take 10 of the 5-star reviews and 10 of the 1-star reviews and say, let's look at this, do this emotional SWOT analysis from the customer's perspective to say, aha, this is where we can, if we're starting a brand from scratch, this is how we want to take on our competitors. These are their vulnerabilities. So I would say, that level of research and using the tools that are in market today is a great way to start that brand from scratch.
So, Stacia, that probably wasn't the answer you were looking for. You were probably looking for stand up a website, install your plugins, set up a Twitter account. There's a lot of work to be done before you even get to that stage.
There really is. Brand is purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Brand is purpose. And if you haven't done that part, then things like your website, which is down in platform, you're jumping ahead.
Mm-hmm.
If you've got questions about brand or other things, and there's you want to ask them, drop us a line. Reach out at trustinsights.ai/contact, or join our free Slack group. Go to trustinsights.ai/analyticsformarketers, where you and over 3,000 other marketers are asking and answering each other's questions every single day. And if you want to catch up on past episodes of Mailbag Monday, just go to our newsletter. Go to trustinsights.ai/newsletter. You can find all of the content we've created over the past week. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time.